I'm going to, without further ado, hand you over to our brilliant panel. So please give them a big App Promotion Summit Berlin welcome to the virtual stage.
Thank you, James. Yes, welcome to the App Engagement in 2020 Summit panel. And maybe I introduce myself first because James missed to do it. My name is Laura Schwartz. I'm a country manager for Central and Eastern Europe at Airship. And Airship is a mobile marketing platform. And I'm very happy to be on this panel or have these great panelists with me from HelloFresh. It's Julia Socio, and it's Joanna Yordake from Black Lane, and Elsa Masoudi Aguilar from TaxFix. And we are going to address how the corona or the pandemic in the last year have changed the environment and how brands optimize customer engagement for the next year. The panelists are really stellar, and I would like to go forward introducing them a bit more in detail. Elsa Masoudi Aguilar is CRM lead at TaxFix, and she's basically concentrated her career around CRM for the past 6+ years. TaxFix, if you don't know it, is a platform that helps users to do their tax returns. And they've started in Germany, but also have expanded into Italy and France recently. Julia, is from HelloFresh, and you must have heard a lot about them in the past year because they have been doing really well. She's a team lead CRM campaign reactivation, very interesting. And she's been with HelloFresh after experiences in gaming and also in food and beverage industry, and has worked in CRM for many years already. Joanna is from Black Lane, and that's maybe a brand that's not so known as HelloFresh, but still she's in charge of the customer retention there. And Black Lane is basically a service for travel, like a private chauffeur service for travelers, both professional and in private life. And they all do this with technology. It's available on app and on web. And Joanna comes with a strong background in customer experience strategy, because she's been working in the luxury industry where this is really a major focus. And now let's dive into our questions. Maybe we talk about the consumer behavior in your industries. How has this been in 2020? Joanna, do you want to start?
Yes, thank you, Laura, for the introduction, first of all, and I'm really happy to meet our audience today virtually this year. And yeah, to answer your question, I would like to start by putting it into perspective. So we serve travelers at Black Lane across the globe. And traditionally, our customers traveled for business purposes mostly, also private, like you said, but mostly for business purposes. They have been using Black Lane to mostly go to the airport and from the airport. And as you can imagine, this behavior has been disrupted in 2020 specifically. If I am to summarize the main consumer behavior changes in the travel industry overall, I would say that first and foremost, customers felt the immediate need this year to upgrade their health and safety standards. This clearly became one of the main criteria for choosing the right travel provider and might stay as such for a while, especially in 2021. Second of all, we observed the shift from global travel to local travel. People started to shift their travel patterns due to different restrictions, country-wise, or simply because they had fear of traveling in this period. And I think we can definitely we can understand that ourselves personally. And third, sustainability. The public sentiment has changed in this direction recently, and the pandemic further reinforced this sentiment. One more consumer behavior that I would like to mention here is also the uncertainty of travel plans. The criteria for choosing a brand in this period shifted, like the cancellation policy, for example, became sometimes more important than the price or the loyalty to a brand. This would be the key ones that I would like to mention.
Elsa, how is it at TaxFix? Has the recent situation has an effect on your business at TaxFix?
Yeah, definitely. For TaxFix has been quite interesting. As you mentioned already, Laura, our main product is basically a platform to do the tax return. And just to give you an idea, tax returns are a bit boring and annoying for people, right? And people need time to do their taxes. So normally our best performing days would always be weekends, public holidays, or really days with bad weather where people are just staying home, right? So when this pandemic came, we suddenly found out like, okay, people are stuck at home now, like they are there for months. And this basically meant that people had way more time to do their taxes now. So in that sense, we really identified an opportunity here where we could educate our users to finally do their taxes. Especially, I would like to emphasize that in Germany, just in Germany, there are more than 8 million people that doesn't do their taxes at all. And that means people are just losing their money, right? Like it's money that belongs to them and the government is just keeping it. So there was really an opportunity for us to educate them, to inform them that that's the right time to do their taxes. So that was definitely a big change of behavior. On top of that, I think because of this pandemic, people were changing jobs or they were just simply getting unemployed, entering Kurzarbeit. There were many changes, right? So that also meant that people has already like still a lot of uncertainty on how to do their taxes. What's going to change now that they faced a lot of changes in their professional lives? Like, are they becoming mandatory filers because they are in Kurzarbeit, for example? So all those things were also like changes on behavior that we identified as challenges are also opportunities for us to improve and educate, inform our users via CRM and all the other channels about the new situations and how we could help them, basically.
Mm-hmm. Very helpful, probably, for those who had challenges throughout Corona with their job environment. Absolutely. And I bet, and I'm pretty sure that for HelloFresh, the year was also having quite some repercussions.
Well, first of all, thank you for the lovely introduction. It is great to be in a panel by women only. That's like something that I want to highlight, how happy I am to be here in these special circumstances. Indeed, 2020 was a roller coaster. Nobody could like figure out how to start replanning a CRM roadmap after what we just experienced, right? So for us, it was really about understanding what the customer needed and how we could basically challenge our CRM way of thinking, because the way we thought about CRM in 2020 was completely different. We needed to readapt right away. Nevertheless, we experienced an increase in organic activations. So it was incredible. We saw app download like going very high in some business units. We kind of figured out how the situation was also evolving in different business units. For example, in Oceania, so in Australia, New Zealand, the situation was completely different. So we kind of adapted along the way. What we started to do was basically rethinking our promotional approach, trying to be less pushy promotionally and really try to educate the customer, which was showing to be very interested in the behind the scene, basically how our supply chain is working, what kind of steps are happening before your box with different ingredients has been delivered, right? So everything that comes with security, with being delivered right to your door, the fact that you can avoid the supermarket lines and any kind of like fuss and hiccups connected to it. And also how our ingredients have been supplied, like, are they really local? Is it really like a supply chain that is protecting the eventual customer? So we started to send a lot of educational comms, multi-channel, so not just via email, but also via app, direct mail, really trying to emphasize everything that is happening before your box has been delivered. So it was really a very nice challenge for us in that sense. So we went very educational, especially in Q2 and Q3. That's really what we did.
Very interesting. Now, I would like to know, Ioana, because you mentioned it before, you have obviously with your business model strong audience around your mobile app. How have you been focusing your mobile app user acquisition efforts this year, and for next year? Do you plan to do that differently?
For acquisition, our efforts were basically focused on meeting these new travel needs, dictated by the changes in behavior that I've mentioned before. And the purpose there was mainly to create awareness. For example, in terms of the global to local shift, we launched recently a service that positioned Blacklane as a strong proposition, a competitive and safe alternative to trains and short flights. So definitely we are now talking about a new audience, people rethinking how they travel, searching for alternatives to trains or planes. On the other hand, the shift of focus from global to local also meant that we had to adapt our acquisition strategy altogether. And these factors will continue to drive these efforts in 2021. On the other hand, this also is a period, in my opinion, where we have the chance to experiment with a new mix of channels, depending on the objective, like smaller budgets, but you just experiment. And yeah, needless to say, retention clearly plays a key role, especially in a period like this. And in my opinion, it is essential for acquisition and retention teams to actually work ever closer together in 2021 and further. Being it more transparency in attribution, for example, or retargeting collaboration and so on. Really going into this customer journey thinking rather than a siloed performance-driven view, I would say.
Yeah, that's what we see at Airship too. Elsa, what is Taxfix planning to ensure user retention next year?
It's definitely we're living a different environment. It's new for all of us. Like, this pandemic just changed the behavior in all industries. No? So for us, even though we had many assumptions, many hypotheses, we realized like we had to really understand our customers, and it doesn't mean only like deep diving into data, but also like sending surveys, talking to them directly via interviews. So the first step we started to take in order to keep retention during next year, it's really deep dive into understanding how our customers feel, our potential users feel, what are their needs, what are their concerns, and really try address them in the right way to provide a great experience that retains our customers year over year. So we started with many surveys. We used to do that already, but we started to increase it given the uncertainty of the moment. Also, we started to collaborate with the user research team a lot to understand and talk to our users directly. And we even implemented a project that is basically the whole marketing team talking weekly to customers with interviews where we just ask them everything we want, we understand them. So that has been really crucial in order to plan our strategy for 2021. And after that, we cannot only just take those assumptions and hypotheses based on the insights we gather from customers. No? So experimentation is also playing a big role here for us because basically sometimes we are proved wrong. No? We think okay, this is gonna work, but we don't know. It's new for everybody. So experimentation is something that we are increasing more and more in order to really drive a proper experience that makes sense for our users and for our different segments. So that's the main steps we're taking. On top of that, personalization, of course, it's something that's becoming more and more important. It's always important, but now that people are living so many different situations, we need to make sure that we send the right message to the right person at the right time, of course. And this means that, for example, if I'm an employed person, I want to know how to do my taxes for my situation, right? I don't care if, I don't know, a married couple with 3 kids can deduct different things, right? So personalization is also really important because taxes are a very complicated topic for everybody. And the more we can personalize and really educate our users with their specific case, the better, no? So that's the last thing that we are also implementing a lot in order to drive retention and improve the experience in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very personal topic of your tax declaration says a lot about you, right? What is your plan for 2021 and to ensure your customer retention, Julia?
Well, first of all, kind of reiterating also what Elsa just said, A/B testing, never stop A/B testing and making sure that your A/B test ground is solid, unbiased, yet dynamic. In HelloFresh, we also go by assumptions sometimes because it's about food. So sometimes we're also kind of seeing something as, okay, this is going to work in that specific country, and maybe that's not the case. Or maybe that specific country is showing a specific learning that we can apply elsewhere. So always having in the mindset of thinking holistically about the things. So with a down-to-earth approach and keep on testing. So that's really what we say, the test is the king. And together with testing, data, relying on data as much as possible. I can make an example dealing with reactivation. We did send some campaigns regarding cancellation reasons. So we were able to actually figure out not what went wrong, but why didn't really work out with HelloFresh. Is it the window delivery time, or is it the ingredients, or is it the overall experience? So we were able to gather the right traits and use them in a context that really enhanced content, not just via email, but also apps. So we were really able to see a leverage and an uplift in engaging customers. So that's really something that is not going to stop in 2021. So it's about personalizing campaigns, it's about tailored segmentation. I believe that's also why we're going away from the so-called blast, so sending a whole bunch of different touch points in a very short amount of time, rather focusing on flash sales, so something that is more tailored, personalized in content, because if we know it's not as personal as a tax, of course, declaration, but if we know that a customer is really into a chicken, we're gonna be sending them a personalized content that is showing that. So it's like, it's for you, it's tailored, it's not invasive. So that's really what we're focusing our efforts on, constantly testing and again, trying to tailor the communication, because it's also promotional, of course. That's also sometimes what it's important, right? We're sending off offers, but why not doing it while showing you the upcoming recipes, what is happening next week? Like, keep yourself engaged in a way that is not so intrusive, I would say. That's really what we're focusing on.
Mm-hmm. And I would think that that your messaging and the relevance of your messaging also goes along those lines, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's also the phrasing and detailed of it, without being too, of course, like I know everything about you, because that's not the case. CRM is just about, we're here to improve in your experience. If we know that our product is valid per se, like you can do so much with our app, honestly. You can rate your recipes. You can even see how you have to cook a specific recipe, which is fantastic. What are the calories related to an ingredient? So if you know that your product is valid like that, just tailor and lure your customer in a way that feels organic, not just per se. So indeed.
Yeah. For my family, it would be very difficult to personalize the content because we're 4 people with very different tastes. So I probably would always
Fantastic.
get different. Elsa, how are you adapting messaging to make it more relevant? Does this play a big role at TaxFix? Probably yes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the direction we're trying to take more and more. yeah, basically it's a bit what I was mentioning before, right? Like we try to really personalize what we send to whom. And here we play a lot, not only with behavior, but also with demographic, right? Like there's a lot of information, as I was saying before, like if you're married with kids, if you are this tax class, or if you are the other one, the messaging should be very different. And on top of that, we also segment and personalize the messaging based on behavior, right? Like if we see that a user has been inactive for X number of time, but has been starting sessions, for example, we might want to send specific reactivation campaign with specific messaging that, for example, could be different if the user didn't start any session in the past 2 years. I don't know, right? Like we also try to really personalize the messaging as much as we can, and we try to really do a mix between demographics and behavior, because both are really important, and then at the end we need to consider that also for the campaign we want to send. So that's definitely something we are doing, and it's actually one of our main areas that we want to keep working on during 2021 to really take our experience to a next level, right? Because as Julia was saying, that's really what CRM is about. So we need to always keep in mind like how we can provide the best user experience to our users across the complete life cycle, and that's quite tough if personalization is not there.
Mm-hmm. Joanna, what would you, in terms of customer communications within the app, what would you recommend to brands like yours if they want to grow revenue or usage from existing customers?
Mm-hmm. My recommendation would be to use a cross-channel strategy. I will be very careful how I choose my words here. What I mean by that is that channels should be used based on their strengths, based on the customer preference and the entire journey you want to achieve. Simply aiming for a higher channel reach will probably have more disadvantages than advantages. But of course, you always have to test your assumptions. That's very important, and Elsa pinpointed very, very correctly at this point. Several studies, for example, show that having more channels, you will have better engagement. I will quote Braze on that. Cross-channel messaging can boost engagement 9 times. But this doesn't mean that you should communicate everything on all channels. This only means that there is a win in communicating on more than one channel, like combining push with content card, which can bring more context to a user, right? And therefore we enrich that experience we are all talking about here. My point is that we need to balance the push and pull channels, and I think this would be my recommendation, but also the logic behind combining the channels. We, for example, increasingly use communication within the app to engage with customers that either do not engage with the email channel, for example, or when the information is essential to have at hand for a next ride. Let's take an easy example, a voucher that you need to use for your next ride. Or when a new app feature is released and the service is being absolutely relevant to have in the app. We also aim to increase the usage of the app channels in 2021 with short feedback loops. I think in-apps are a very good channel to do that. And this goes into this need of constantly gathering insights from customers to confirm our assumptions or not. All in all, I think we must put ourselves in the shoes of the customer and engage where the customer wants to engage with us. Therefore, a comprehensive channel mix is needed, and this would be my recommendations. But this also requires a strong collaboration, let's face it, between product, BI, and marketing. So it's really, we need to be in the middle, pulling the strings together.
We have a question from the audience from Ian Russell from Money Hub. He wants to know just how important is deep linking for app engagement? Does someone wants to answer this question? Maybe Joanna?
Yeah, I can answer it. I mean, it's essential, isn't it? Because the user experience will fail if you don't have the right technology, the right deep links driving customers where you want. So you can create the nicest communications, but if the CTA and the journey is not seamless, then yeah, you will bring more frustration maybe. So definitely very important.
Any recommendations from you, Julia, on a similar business? What would you recommend them to leverage their customer communications to retain their users? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Definitely what Joanna was just mentioning, right? So be very aware of what are the strengths of your specific channel, and also trying to work in a multi-channel perspective whenever you're launching a big campaign. That's why, for example, in our case, we're really optimizing our emails with a lot of deep linking testing. That's why I was smiling at that. And also a template that is really mobile friendly. That's really where we're focusing a lot of our efforts. And just like what Joanna says, is something that comes with a lot of like department collaboration. So in our case, it's also about the funnel within the app. So if we know that UI-wise and funnel-wise, a customer can activate, so doing the first checkout or reactivate smoothly, then it's something that it's worth mentioning. It's something worth of including in another campaign, maybe a flyer, a direct mail with a QR code. So if you know that you're playing with a nice channel that is improving and it's giving so much to the customer, that indeed push for that. So that will be definitely my tip in that sense. And kind of coming back to what I was saying about not being too intrusive, that's also what we tested extensively last year, really in-app. An in-app message is incredibly powerful, pop-ups and things like that. And when we were able to see and tested and had statistically significant results, was really how modular in-app messages, so smaller ones, were actually performing way better than full background in-app messages. And that's because the experience of the user is not interrupted by CRM. We're merely giving extra information. We're informing them that a new premium recipe is out or a new street food line in the UK has been available and you can grab the chance while you can, but it's not out there. It's totally fine if you just swipe it out and you just get rid of that pop-up. We're just getting extra information for you and we're not being abruptive. So that's also another tip that I will give. Consider an enrichment, like CRM should be considered an enrichment whenever it's within the app. Whenever you're luring customer in, and luring is a horrible word, attracting customers, try to be dedicated, use send out timings. That's also something that we do, like optimizing your send out time with push notifications or emails, and try to enhance the content, make it personal. So don't be too intrusive once they're in, because they're already in, and try to be personal when you want them back. Yeah.
Okay, you're nodding, Elsa. You confirm that. How are you using in-app messaging, and how would you what would be the recommendation for similar services?
Sure. No, I completely agree with Julia and Joanna. That's why I was nodding. I think absolutely. I think it's very important to use different channels, also to understand what our users prefer, because some, for example, in-app might be a channel that would work perfectly for some users, but for some others, they might prefer email. So in general, I think it's also really important to understand and play around and think out of the box, okay, how we can reach out to our users and what they prefer and really adapt to that. I think both of them said already a lot. I would like just to emphasize something that I think it's very important and some companies forget sometimes about it. Sometimes we want to increase conversion rates. We have really ambitious goals, and it's really easy to forget sometimes what CRM is about and just create really aggressive campaigns, really intrusive, become really intrusive, really frequent. And that's, from my perspective, a really big mistake that many companies do when they want short-term results. So I would really encourage brands to think more on the long term and really think about providing a good experience, because it might seem that the beginning conversion rates can have a bigger increase if you are a bit more aggressive and you're just really focusing on your campaigns on really converting users with drastic messages. But on the long run, the experience is going to pay off, because if you really treat your customers properly, you inform them, you provide them value through your campaigns. That's what will drive retention, because at the end, our users are not stupid, right? Like they want to use our app and or the website or whatever, and then they want to be treated correctly. They don't want to be spammed continuously. So I would really would like to highlight that let's focus first on the experience, and then conversion rates and retention, everything would come automatically after because of the experience.
So it's basically a lot about experience, relevance, and convenience, and the the user retention will come from that or through that. That leads us to our last question, and maybe Elsa, you want to continue on that because you've been talking about that already. What would be your recommendation for companies that have been struggling with the pandemic in terms of user retention? What would you recommend them?
I think here it's really, really important to really deep dive into user needs. No, it's a bit what I was mentioning before. Like for us, we found really interesting the fact that we started to talk to our users. We're marketing, and we are sending messages to them, but did we actually talk to them? Do we know how they think, how they talk, how they move? Like, no. And we need to know that. We really need to understand our audience in order to really send powerful and valuable messaging. So I would really encourage everybody to continue this path that Attacks Week we started, and it's been really helpful for us. That it's basically really understand how our users are and improve and get insights based on that to improve your campaigns. So it might sound a bit basic, but sometimes we forget about this. Like we are continuously talking to customers via our campaigns, but then we need to know how they are and we need to understand them. So that would be the the first step that I think every company should take, especially with these changes, because the industries are changing, the behavior is changing, and we don't know anymore like how we should proceed. No, so that would be the first step, definitely. And then experimentation, data analysis. Let's try to understand what our users are doing in the app. What is the churn behavior when our users are churning? How can we prevent it? Probably a churn prediction model that could be also interesting here to really drive these users back and have retention. And yeah, experimentation. I really I'm a big fan of experiments, of A/B testing. I find it very interesting. Sometimes I'm really sure about something. I'm like, I know this is gonna work, and then it doesn't. And you know, we are wrong many times, and it's very surprising sometimes for me. I don't know, like you can test an amazing design on an email against really old or even against the plain text, and the plain text could work better, right? Like I got surprised many times. So I think it's really important, especially in these times where we don't know anymore what's going on with our users, with the situation, to really work on experimentation and don't assume anything, but just test everything.
Yeah, I see the same. I'm always wrong. I'm always not like the crowd. I always say, oh, it's 100%, everybody will like this, this layout, and then it's exactly the other one.
There you go.
Julia, do you have something to add to Elsa? What maybe a company who has not been doing as well as HelloFresh, also from their business model? Still, what would you recommend? And you're mute. Just
yes. No. Diversify if you can your not your offer per se, because that's your core business, your product, but trying to tailor perhaps your product to the situation that is currently happening. We've been seeing so many companies doing so many things remotely, events or any kind of thing. So try to be flexible and adaptable to the situations that it's happening. Might be, again, very broad, but that's indeed what you should do. So really pay attention to the situation in a specific market or in a specific sector. That will be indeed my first approach in that sense. And don't question so much what you're doing. What you're doing can really bring an added value to your customer. Just try to diversify and try to make them feel like your content is relevant, what you're saying to them is relevant, make them feel like you care. That's, I think, the big learning that we had in 2020, right? So make them feel like it's not just because things are just crazy and You cannot really predict what is happening next month. It's just your product is valid, your communication as well, your CRM will just follow naturally. And if you keep on diversifying and testing, you're going to be find your answers. So just don't stop testing. And once you test something that works, apply it, diversify it, tailor it even more. Just keep on being flexible, both in your CRM, but also in your offer, in the way you're approaching the customer.
So the brands should hang in there, even if it's not the yellow of the egg right now. Joanna, that has probably been a tough year for Black Lane. Being in the travel sector, like everybody was struck by the pandemic. What would you especially recommend as a takeaway from your experience?
Absolutely. I would say first and foremost, look at the whole experience, not only the communication part. I know that retention people are very much focused on CRM, but the communication is the last step. We need to make sure that the experience and all the touch points in that experience are aligned, because only like in this way customers are retained finally. Then I would also say, and I will build a little bit on what Elsa said, know your data and be customer-centric. Be clear on what insights you need to help you take customer-centric decisions. And for that, you need to have a good grasp and understanding of the data you already have, but also being ready to collect new data points, like having interviews with customers when needed. But you need to be very clear, because otherwise you also will go very intrusively into the feedback part, right? And nevertheless, be empathetic in the content of your communication. And I've heard this in other sessions in the App Promotion Summit. I think it's something that becomes more and more relevant. We need to take into account the local situation of customers, especially for global brands. Makes it more complex, but it's absolutely necessary. And one example in the travel industry is that you shouldn't maybe push people to travel, because there are many restrictions and you should be aware of them, but you should rather be prepared to serve them, to care for them when they are ready, when they need to travel, because some people do need to travel in these times. And of course, the concept that I think was very much debated in this period is the authenticity of the message. It's better to focus on what you are doing as a brand for the customer, rather than overloading them with the brand response to a situation, to external factors like the COVID-19. And yeah, nonetheless, and probably this would be my last one, would be to pay constant attention to the evolving consumer behavior changes. And this is why we talk so much about consumer behavior changes in this panel as well. As we go in 2021, we need to adapt constantly. And this looks also at the communications we currently have in the life cycles, for example, the segmentation, the targeting criteria, everything will play a role here. So my main message would be ready to adapt to change.
Very good, thank you. And we have a question from the audience. Alexandra Smith wants to know, what have you seen are the most important and effective strategies to re-engage dormant users? What has worked best for you? And he means users that haven't engaged in several months. Maybe Julia, because you were nodding.
Dealing with reactivation, I think I can give some examples and some answers. Indeed, dormants are like the tricky ones in some senses. So I guess a good understanding of which channel can be more relevant to them. That's why sometimes we also do direct mail campaigns. So reaching offline sometimes is better than very unengaged customer that has been reached digitally plenty, and it just doesn't work because maybe the content was not right, the frequency was not right. So try to go for the channel that is most adaptable and most relevant for the customer. That will be my very first thing. And then once you know which is the channel that can work, bring newness to your content. Don't just remind the customer about, again, the perks of your service or the specifics, because they've been there. Probably the customer that they engaged in the past with you, so they know more or less how to navigate it. More educate them on what's happening and what's new. Like I mentioned, the whole work we've been doing about our app, but also different recipes that have been added, new ingredients. So the fact that you can choose vegan recipes. So bring some newness to the customer, make them feel that there is work behind it, that your brand is evolving in the offer, in the portfolio, if you want to call it. And that can be the content that a dormant customer might find relevant, because you're like not just trying, of course, to bring them back to the lovely family, but it's relevant, it's something new, it's something that can excite him again. Yeah.
And Elsa, for you, is that similar, because your product is less like a entertainment as cooking could be, but more like a real service to something you have to do?
Yeah, I think first thing we try to always understand with when we run a reactivation campaign, it's why our users are not active anymore. And I think this is really important. Do we know like why they are not coming back? Do we understand that? Because otherwise, like you will struggle a lot to reactivate it, because maybe you are giving them discounts because you think it's about the price, but maybe it was not about the price. Maybe they just had a terrible experience with your product. So I think the first step I would suggest to take, or at least I take attacks with trying to understand it. We do that via surveys right after they use our product, for example. So we know if they were happy with our service, if they were not, what kind of complaints they have, etc. And based on that, we can then run reactivation campaigns in case they don't come back, right? Because yeah, the typical thing you would do, it's voucher campaigns with discounts, which I always still recommend to experiment with, because yeah, maybe a lower discount would work better than a higher one and things like that. But sometimes it's not about that. So maybe the user had a really bad experience, for example, with TaxFix. So here a voucher might help, but that's not it. No, so in that case, maybe we would prefer to deep dive into what was the case, what things went wrong, like, and how we can address that in a different way. No, so it really depends on the industry, but I would really suggest to, before just doing the typical thing you would do to reactivate customers, you really understand what are the pain points they're having that are making them not come back, basically. And
probably also, where have they left? What was the situation when they left, right? Because that could be in the middle of a declaration, a text declaration they did, or that could be at the end of one and they've sent it and they're done and then they're waiting for the next year, right?
Exactly. No, that's a really good point what you made. Like, we really try to be granular there and try to understand, okay, where did the user leave? But I think our product in this case is really special, right? Like, you need to go through many questions, and even though we try to make it the most simple, and it's actually like the tax return can be done in 22 minutes. But truth is that still it's a tax return. You need to answer many questions about yourself, and you can drop at many different places. So try understanding where the user dropped is definitely a key point for us. It might work also for some industries, but I know apps are very different, so this might differ. But yeah, it's very important to understand that.
Okay, I see we're already over the time, but it was lovely speaking with you three. Very interesting insights from three very different brands and three stellar CRM experts. I'm very happy to have led the panel. And yeah, maybe to sum up, what I took away from what I thought was the focus of what you all three said is that it's a lot about the experience you create for your customers. It's about the relevance you provide and the convenience, especially in those times that are not as always and that are particularly difficult. So yeah, I'm sure many people have drawn a lot of insights from this panel. Thanks again for being here and telling us about your experiences. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Cool.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.